Yeah, just careful of the camera,
Welcome to the 2025 Speaker Series. Thanks to those of you that were here for Mary Mo. She did a great job. Could we get another quick round of applause for her? She really did capture the magic of Butte. That was really awesome. We appreciate her coming. So thank you for coming to our panel series. We're doing this for the second year in a row, but with a whole new crew of people. We're super excited about it. And we're going to get going here. I am Lindsay Mulcahy, and I volunteer with the Honorary Raw Committee and put together the speaker series with Helen Patterson, who I roped into being part of the panel this year. So she didn't know that was happening. But I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get going with our conversation.
My name is Aubrey Japp, and I am the director of the Butte Silver Bow Public Archives.
My name is Dorothy Brophy, and I work in Allihies Copper Mine Museum doing geological research.
My name is Jim McCarthy. I'm a volunteer at the archives.
Good morning, my name is Claudia Drosik, and I work in Allihies Copper Mine Museum.
And the reason Jim and Helen are here is because they are descendants of Beara that now live in Butte.
Wow.
I'm Tyler Sullivan, and I volunteer in the Allihies Copper Mine Museum, and I'm the chairman, so I do all kinds of bits and pieces all over the place. Nothing in particular, everything in general.
My name is Niall O'Sullivan. I volunteer at Allihies Copper Mine Museum. I'm a primary school teacher on the Beara Peninsula, and I lead the virtual education program.
I'm Helen Patterson, and I work with the Irish Speaker Series with Beara and Butte.
My name is Anne McNally, and I volunteer on the Copper Mine Museum Committee, Secretary of State. And a few other bits and bobs as well. I'm sure you're well familiar with that, and even that have sat on the local committee. We end up doing a lot of different things.
So, Anne, real quick, while you hold my phone, no, we're going to give it back to Anne. It just occurred to me, which should have occurred to me earlier, but it didn't, that perhaps not everybody knows what Beara is. Could you explain that quickly?
Well, Beara is the most southwesterly peninsula in the island of Ireland. It's a place of fantastic panoramic beauty. It's a little peninsula that sticks its toe out into the wild Atlantic Ocean. And as we say, when you get to the end of our peninsula, next stop, America. Literally. There's literally nothing between the vast ocean and our West America. So yeah, it's a little remote part of Ireland, but with a huge history. And as I said, a place of great natural beauty, not unlike your beautiful landscape here that we see outside, except that we have the sea and you don't. It's probably the greatest.
Okay, so we came up with a series of questions, and we're just going to have a little discussion here. And you guys are welcome, as we talked before, to answer them as you wish. Okay, so this one's kind of directed at our guests from Beara. That's okay, you don't need your notes, Jim. I'm really the only one that thinks so. You're okay. Jim is a slacker.
I never did any notes. I guess I'm on my own.
No. Okay, so this is directed towards our Beara people, and we will be asking the mirrored question towards our Butte people. But how and when did you learn about Butte in your life? Yeah, sure.
Okay, Lindsay, I touched on it the last night I was speaking at the reception at the hotel. The first time I heard about Butte was going to Mass on Sunday, up this high with my parents, and the priest would quite regularly call out, such and such has died, and please pray for the repose of the soul of such a person from Carmore and Butte, Montana. And just slowly but surely, that was a regular occurrence every second week, every third week, every month. And it began to be embedded in our brains, Butte, Montana, Butte, Montana. What is this Butte, Montana? Where is it? Slowly but surely we grew older. And Butte became a place out there. Yanks, as they were referred to when they came home to visit us, might refer to it. If they came from New York, or they came from Boston or Chicago, they might be a reference to Butte, because Butte was indelibly linked in their history and in their families. So Butte began to grow, and really when it became more clear to me and to a lot of people in Allihies especially and the Beara Peninsula is when we started the Mine Museum project in Allihies. And the Mine Museum project is a volunteer community project that has grown and grown and grown over the last 20 years. But then Butte became centre stage and it's still growing. And these visits, the first time we visited was in 2022. We were on the St. Patrick's Day parade. It was whistle stop. It was quick. It was high speed. But we set the wheels in motion for a sister city relationship. We are here again at the kind invitation of the Beara Festival Committee, and we want to develop these links more. I had two priorities when I came here. Well, I had more than two priorities, really. I had many priorities, but one of my priorities was to meet with Ellen Crane, Ellen from the archives, and I did meet her yesterday. We had a great chat because Ellen Crane and myself linked up about 35 years ago. When I started thinking about it, I had to sit down. But 35 years ago, and we started putting correspondence and the first initial steps, small steps, to linking Allihies and Butte. And I met Ellen, and we have taken that on since, because when we were here in 2022, we signed a proclamation of Sister City twinning with Butte, Montana, and I met yesterday with JP Gallagher and Aubrey here from the archives, and we want to put more meat on the bones of that relationship. We want to make it more, have definite goals and aims, and that's where we're going with this from now on. And we will be linking with Aubrey and putting teams in place on our side and on this side to grow the relationship into the future, and not just have it as a piece of paper, but as a living thing that people actually come and go.
Very good.
Would anybody else like to share how they first learned about Butte in their lives? Yeah.
Hi everybody. I grew up in Dublin, the eldest child of a Beara woman who had left Castletown Beara in 1950 as a young woman and married a Dubliner. So my holidays were spent in Beara. But my first time I heard about Butte was when Mabel was coming home. So Mabel was my mother's first cousin, my grandma's niece. My grandma's two brothers came to Butte in the early 20th century and never came back to Ireland. But Mabel, the daughter of Dennis, came every few years, and what I remember about Butte was the excitement. Mabel is coming home. And there would be visits organised, my mum in our house in Dublin, and my two aunts who were in Dublin, and my grandma in her latter years lived with us, with her various daughters. And then there were various gatherings and events and chats and photographs taken, and obviously she brought the news from her father to my grandmother, and that was wonderful because obviously communications in those days was very limited. All the, telephones were not, people might have had telephones, but a transatlantic phone call was more than a mortgage. Anyway, so they were great, absolutely wonderful memories. Yeah.
That's great.
That's what you to me. Yeah. Oh, I had the great privilege of visiting her grave 2 years ago with Lindsay.
Yes.
Yeah, in Holy Cross with her parents. Yeah.
My first time hearing about Butte was in the same manner as Tyke beside me, only a few decades later. Also Mass on a Sunday morning. And we were very curious about it as young children about this place. And I think the word itself, Butte, and there's something magical about the word, and it was mysterious to us, and it started conversation as well, after a while. What is Butte and where is Butte? And so a few of my granduncles would have been, or great-granduncles would have mined here, and some of whom moved back home, and one for definite who bought a farm. And so for me, Butte meant money at 10 years old, and how will I get money now to get a farm as well, basically. But yeah, so that's my first memory of hearing of Butte.
So my experience with Butte, it's the first time in America. As a child, I probably never heard about this. I wouldn't expect it even I would be in Ireland in the future. I don't have any family in Ireland. My any ancestors are in America. I don't know anything about it. So it's amazing how you're looking for your connections, your roots, and it's incredible, really. I'm trying to learn actually what you're doing so well and how it looks. It's really amazing because I don't know a story of my family really. I'm finding this out here, just being here for the first time and being in Ireland for so many years. So thanks for having me here.
We should mention that Claudia is originally from Poland and she immigrated to Ireland and now works in the Allihies Copper Mine. So, not Copper Mine, the museum, jeepers. Excellent. Okay, thank you for sharing your stories. So on the reverse side of this coin, I would like to ask our Butte people, how did you first learn about Beara and how has that affected your life?
I'll start. Let's do this. So as a kind of humorous experience, Jim over here would say, now there's this corner, and it goes up a hill, and over the hill is Allihies, and this corner, buses can't get through it. And we learned at this corner at Gortaheg, where Jim's family is from, that a bus indeed cannot get over it to the village of Allihies. But in more seriousness, we at the archives get dozens of people every year looking for their family roots, trying to trace back where they came from in Ireland so they can go visit their family homes. And then vice versa, we have folks from Ireland come to Butte, kind of seeing the opposite side. So here the Butte people are going backwards and they're going forward, saying, now where did my ancestors go? You know, where did they come? How did they make all of this money? And so that's kind of the experience we have here, those connections from a genealogy standpoint of people looking for their families.
Oh, my turn. Okay. I guess I learned about the Beara from my grandparents. My grandfather's family grew up in Allihies, and my grandmother's family grew up in Allihies, which is kind of across the hill from each other in Ireland. They met each other here in Butte and married in Butte. They didn't know each other in Ireland, which I thought was a surprise. So growing up, my grandparents were all gone when I was young. My last grandparent, my dad's mom, passed away in '55, and I was just still a young little kid. But we did hear these stories about Allihies Parish and Allihies Parish. And so growing up, I had this concept, geographically about parishes, like I'm a St. Pat's parish and a Dicey parish, St. Anne's parish. So to me, that's what a parish was, but it's totally different what a parish is in Ireland than what a parish is here in Butte. So that was a real misunderstanding for me to have to get a hold of. And one of the other big things about Ireland and Butte and the Beara were villages and townlands and cities. When you read the names of these different cities, or Allihies and Allihies, and then you get Glengarriff and all these other little communities that are together, it's really difficult to understand and put these things together, especially like on a map, because they kind of flow into each other. But if you kind of look at it like just like you would be, it's more like neighborhoods. You got Dublin Gulch and Meaderville and McQueen and the Boulevard and the racetrack and Floral Park. That's kind of how this is in Ireland, and the folks in Ireland talk that way, and they reference all these different little communities that you think are cities, and they're just little villages, just like our little enclaves here in Butte. So if you get that understanding in your head when you try and figure out where these families are from and how these townlands and villages go together, then the Beara experience is a little bit easier to understand. And when I was little growing up, that was really confusing for me with all these names, and especially how to pronounce them, because I still have a hell of a time learning it. The K is not always silent in Gaelic. So, anyway.
So my grandfather and my great-grandfather both came from Ireland. I heard about it from when my grandfather on my dad's side passed away. We were free to talk about Ireland. He had a stigma about not speaking about it when he was young because of some childhood trauma with the family when he came over here. He was very young. He was 16, lied about his age to come into the States. But he was from Castletown Beara, a small area outside of Castletown Beara called Clune Tree, and I was actually able to go to that family home. And then I found where my great-grandfather was just outside of Castletown Beara at Allihies in a small town called Lahanmore, and these folks helped me find where my great-grandfather's house was. It was, okay, here we go. It was very emotional because I thought, I wish my dad was here. I wish my grandfather was here because they bring history more. But I started learning about that from my dad. He was free to talk about it more. My grandmother was still alive. They helped me put together the family's background. And then when I started looking online at the archives, it's like, look at this treasure trove. Look at everything I can find. It was amazing. So between all these people that have helped me look at the background and the folks at the archives, that's how I found about my family for my whole life.
Sorry that 2 years ago when we were here, we went on a very memorable trolley ride. Memorable for lots of reasons, but all very good fun. And at one stage I was sitting next to Helen. I had the good fortune of being sitting next to Helen. And we were talking as the conversation went on about our family roots and so on. And Helen at one point said to me, well, she said, my grandmother was Mary Lowney from Lehanmore. And I said, well, that's strange, because my grandmother was Mary Lowney from Lehanmore. And I said, yeah, how can this? And of course, it didn't take a lot of digging to discover, the mutual. So we're related pretty closely as well. So that's how things happen.
Okay.
I'm going to add to it a small bit. When we were here in 2022, Tara, who works in the Mine Museum now, was here with us, and Tara and myself were both born and reared in Lehanmore, which is a tiny townland of about 10 houses now. So that's an added tale, or an extension to the tale, I should say, really, of Helen, which is really nice.
That was great. So this question kind of ties into the previous two questions. And some of you kind of already answered it, but I'm still going to go with it. How and when did you realize there was a special connection between Beara and Butte? Somebody have a broader story? Right?
So, as I said earlier, I grew up in Dublin, but I always had the pull to go back to Beara, to go and live there, not back. I spent my holidays there as a child. But in 1989, I did move to Castletown Beara, which I mentioned in the talk yesterday was financial suicide, career suicide. But it was the makings of me and my general happiness and development as a person and so on and so forth. And after a few years, I got the chance to be the librarian in Castletown Beara. It's a one-person branch of Cork County Library. It's the furthest branch from the head office in Cork City. And it became obvious to me very early on that I had a connection to Butte because of the person I mentioned earlier and the various other relatives. But the fact that this is a much bigger story became very obvious to me very early on because I kept getting requests from people And there was a whole section of books in the library about Butte. And so people kept looking from all parts of the States and the world, particularly the States, looking for information about their families. So I ended up doing all sorts of research for people. And in all the documentation, went to Butte, went to Butte, went to Butte, came back from Butte, etc., etc. So that really caught my attention in a completely different way, and that's how I actually ended up doing the work I'm doing now. Jim tells me I have to tell him about my relations. So first of all, I'm related to Jim. And what note should we have the first? Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, okay. So Mabel that I mentioned earlier was the oldest of 3 children. She had a sister Lois who married somebody whose name has gone out of my head. Phelan Frey, I think. And they moved to Colorado.
Phelan
Fry, that's it, sorry. They moved to Colorado. And then the third child was a son, George, who had various businesses in Butte, but then ended up working for the Democrats and moved to Washington, D.C. He worked for Sergeant Schreiber in the anti-poverty program. And
he was a Silver County surveyor.
That's right, yeah. And so had quite an interesting career. Yeah, so that was my mum's first husband.
Right.
And obviously related to you.
Right.
Yes.
Around the horn.
Okay. And then also, I only discovered in 2012 that so this McCarthy's are my grandmother's people, but my granddad, her husband, had 5 uncles who came to Butte. One of whom came home to die because he got sick, and the other 4 worked here for many years, but then moved to the Yukon. And the 2 single guys died there, and the 2 married guys came back to Washington State with their wives. They met their wives in Butte. One of the wives was from Bridget Harrington Kosky, was from Jersey Island. The second last house at the western end of the peninsula, of the island of Jersey, and he was from 5 miles east of town, so they definitely never met in Beara. They met in Butte.
So I'll tell you a little story about my family's connection to Butte. A family heirloom is a photograph with 4 stout gentlemen standing well dressed and probably taken in New York, but it was taken, we found out, in 1896. One of them was my grandfather and 3 others were my granduncles. And they were returning to Beara and to Allihies from Butte. And they were coming home for the wedding of their sister who was getting married, and coincidentally got married in Lehanmore as well, which is probably up an awful lot today for a very small place. But anyways, they were on their way back, and 4 of them came back. 2 of them, as had been mentioned previously, bought a little plot of land. One of them, does anyone know or have heard of the expression clownish stock? Clownish stock is Gaelic, and it's when a gentleman marries a lady and takes over the farm very conveniently and becomes the farmer of that particular piece of land. So clownish stock is when the man would not be the owner of the land, the lady would be, but he would move in and take over. But anyways, my grandfather did that, and he got married in Carmore. My other granduncle stayed in Allihies, down by the beach, just beside where my family roots are. And the 2 others returned to Butte after the wedding of their sister, probably 1896 as well. We have nailed it down by the fact that we know when my granddad got married. But one of them stayed here with mining, back mining. Another one went mining for a short time, and his name was Dennis Soonish O'Sullivan. He eventually, after not a very long time, moved up to beyond Missoula. Does anybody know a place called Dast?
D''ASTE?
Yeah. It's a small place outside of Missoula. But anyways, he got tired of the mining, it seems, and he moved into ranching and farming and linked up with the local indigenous tribe and got on very well with them, as our family would be inclined to do. They fit in very well. And the little community. Eventually, the story goes, the town burned down. But there is one feature remaining, and that is the church, which still stands on the prairie up in Dast, outside of Missoula. And we only saw it we looked it up if you go on Google Maps, it's still there. So my granduncle, Dennis O'Sullivan, ironically, to close the circle, my cousin also, Jim McCarthy, yesterday, we're not a cousins, Jim. But yesterday brought me out to the graveyard and showed me exactly where Dennis is buried. And I took a photograph on the spot. So that is my connection. It's a family heirloom. All the branches of the family have this photograph of 4 gentlemen, probably taken in New York on their way back, but that is a very real connection. And we don't have an account of the other granduncle Jim, but he's okay. So that's me, and that's my real tangible connections with Butte, Montana.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question. How did you feel the first time that you visited Butte or Beara?
Well, I'll just keep going. So, seeing as how nobody else is jumping in, the first time I visited Butte, Montana was, of course, 3 years ago in 2022. Now, we started, I go back to this museum project we have in Allihies, which is a very vibrant, living, busy centre. We started it about 25 years ago. It's now on the go and open for 20 years. But as I've forgotten now what the question was in the first place. The first time I came here was we were often threatening around the table we'd have to visit Butte, Montana. I go back 20 years. We'd have to visit Butte, Montana. Somebody, ironically, in jocosely, came up one night with the suggestion we hire a bus. Not the greatest idea in the world, you know, the joke. But eventually, much talk and much threatening, and plans were put in place, and what came along? COVID. And so plans had to be postponed once again. So this was 2019, 2020. Eventually made it in 2022. First impressions were there's a piece here about the connections and similarities that you see between the people of Allihies, the people of Beara, and the people of Butte. You see a hardness, an openness, an honesty, and a welcome, you know, that's still there. And I don't know, is that mining connections, or is it historical, or what is it? But I recognised it, you know. Now it was a bit artificial maybe for St. Patrick's Day in 2022, because it was the first parade, I believe, after the COVID, and there was many people, and it was a fantastic occasion. But this time, actually, I have seen it much more clearly. I have seen Butte much more clearly, because I have seen the geographical lie of the land, and I have seen what and I'm actually a bit surprised that it's a growing, vibrant place. Jim brought us out yesterday on a drive down to the graveyard, and I see a lot of industry happening here again. Butte is on the way up rather than on the way down, or it's not stagnant. It's a growing place, and the town itself is a fine, typical Midwestern town. So I'm very impressed with the people. I see the connections. I see the connections that we have with the place. And it's not just mining, there's the people, there's a generosity of spirit which I can recognise straight away.
My first time here was in 2022 as well, and my first impression of it is that I was totally blown away by the people here and the warm welcome we received. And the same as what Tyke said there, the general feeling from the people here was the warmth, and like nothing was bother, you know, and a great community of people here, which we are familiar with as well. And yeah, I felt at home here actually from the get-go, as well as being blown away and high on life for the few days we were here. Oh my god, yeah. It took about 6 months to process it, but it home. Such was the effect that she had on us. Which was brilliant, yeah. So, yeah, and the second time around, now this trip is, I feel like it's more settled, you know, or maybe I am, I don't know, a little bit. But yeah, it's the same thing, the same again with in terms of the warmth of the people and the community and so many similarities, and it's just it's been fantastic. So thanks very much for having us.
I'm sorry I'm at the tail end of this because I really am just going to reiterate everything that Mike and Niall has already said. I would the welcome and the warmth is actually overwhelming, and the sense of community, all the similarities between our two communities. You know, talking about small, tight-knit community. I mean, that's very obvious and evident. We see this, I'd say if you stayed here for a week, probably I can't get over the amount of familiar faces and I see this time from my trip 3 years ago. And the same warmth, friendship, welcome extended, and as Niall said, nothing seems to be a bother. And we're well used to, if people come to visit us, we're well used to having to kind of maybe accommodate them by way of spins here and there, spins out here, spins out there, and it's the very same. We're reciprocating. We hope we reciprocated the welcome, the warmth we got when you came to visit us last. But that sense of community and that fierce sense of pride that you have in your history and your culture is palpable. And we very much can identify with that, and it's wonderful, and it's lovely, and it's so nice to be part of it for these days.
Can we get a Butte person tell us how they felt about that?
Thanks, boss. So I do not know if I have Beara roots. I'm kind of like the carpenter who has broken steps. I do genealogy all the time, so I of course know very little about my own genealogy. But I like to think of myself as an honorary Beara person. But I think what was so special about the trip is seeing these places that we're researching all the time and seeing these names that we see on a map or in Rivard's books about genealogy in person.
We can pronounce it pretty well too.
Better than Jim. He kept saying, well, how do you spell that? And Dorothy goes, it doesn't matter, you still can't say it, Jim. But seeing Jim connect with his family members, in Iris, we went to O'Shea's Bar, and which is Jim's family, and to go there, to see Helen touch her family land was really beautiful. To see her put her feet in the ocean and just be so giddy was so beautiful. And we've managed to see each other now every year since 2022, and to me it's much more than like a professional project. It's something that's very personal. Like, we're all friends, we text each other, we share our personal moments, we share what's going on with our kids and our families and our own community. So to me, it's really growing into something that is grown out of the roots and the connection, but and to be there in that place and see it, it's just a real treasure of a place.
I'm going to ask Jim to talk, because you shared a video with me once for your first trip to Beara when you were with your sons, and you had a video of going in, and can you talk about that a little bit? Oh, jeepers. You were driving into... Tell Jim's story. You were driving in, you showed it to me, it was really cool, and your sons were like, Dad, this is your family land.
Right on the wrong side of the road. I'm lucky enough, I've been there twice. I went with my boys and their wives in 2017, and I happened to go back this last spring with this Allihies twinning group, and both times I've been there, I've never felt such warmth and feeling. We spent a lot of time in the Beara, which was my goal, and with these folks and other folks that we met that are really good friends. And as we were walking downtown in Castletown, Beara, I felt this feeling when I saw these people walk by. I said, God, I feel like I'm in Butte. Yeah. I think I know these people. They look really familiar. So I had the same thing when these folks came here and we walked around and saw people. I said, these people look like they could be in Castletown Beara. You're right, it's really, really similar. So for me as an Irishman, to have these feelings like that was really good. I felt really comfortable. And the folks in Ireland that we met in the bars and different places, they all shared that same feeling, and they welcomed us like we welcomed them. And the connection that you feel between Butte and Beara, it's really there. It's real. And it's a connection that I've come to expand upon in things that I relate, because it's such a feeling, and it's really intense, and it's really personal. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned from this Beara-Butte connection thing.
Okay, I'm going to call Dorothy out really quickly, if that's okay. So Dorothy came 2023, and I'll give you this one in a second. And you wrote us a thank you card when you left, and we have it on our board in our staff kitchen at the archives. And I read it often, and you wrote something along the lines of, I didn't expect to, but I fell in love with Butte. Oh no! And it was just, we fell in love with you too, and we're so happy you were here. But can you share your experience? Because you came here individually, and you were here a lot longer.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just the other parts up here. I'm really happy. Sorry, I'm really happy to share this. My experience was completely different. My first visit was in May 2023. And I came here not for fun, I came to work in the archives to do research. Very happy to do that. No, I didn't resent that, don't get me wrong. But I came on my own. I had only been to the States once before, that was to New York, which is a completely different world, clearly. I did the journey in one day, 3 flights, from Cork City to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Salt Lake City, and Salt Lake to Butte. And my accommodation was in the Hodgins Ryan Mansion in the Excelsior Avenue. And that was an amazing experience, which I love talking about that to Cody, Lindsay's older daughter, because she was starting to see my room. So the room I stayed in was in the top story, and it was called the maid's room, okay? And that irony wasn't lost to me. You know, I kept thinking, first of all, it was just my room. I kept thinking that if I had been here 100 years before, like my ancestors and all our ancestors, there probably would be 4 or 5 women in that room, and they would have been working really, really hard. So making the journey on my own was really hard. I was really nervous, I was really anxious, I didn't know what I was facing, I knew a little bit, but I knew nothing really, but I realised afterwards. But very quickly, like once I got over the jet lag and the whatever, then I got some sleep, I felt extraordinarily at home, and I was really welcomed by the staff of the archives, Aubrey, Lindsay, Kim, Shannon, Jen, Cara. They were all wonderful to me. But also the volunteers, and of course I knew Jim already. I met Jim in Ireland in 2017. We connected, and that was great. That was amazing. So to see a familiar face coming in, that I could say, "Oh, hi Jim," it was great. And a whole lot of different things happened while I was there, that were just amazingly uplifting for me. One of them was on the first Sunday. I decided I'd go to Mass in St. Patrick's. And so I wasn't driving, I walked. I did loads of walking. So I was walking down to the church, and obviously the presbytery priest house is behind it. So Father Patrick was actually in the garden doing something, because I was quite early. And of course, being, as you all know, he's very, hello, how are you? Oh, he's here, he's here.
Pretty nosy.
He's like,
Hi, how are you? Oh no, I'm caught in the hop, right. Oh my God. Do you notice what I said? I'm caught out because I started to talk about it, so I didn't realise he was here. I'm caught in the hop because he's here. He's going to hear us. Anyway, so he spoke to me anyway. Father Patrick spoke to me in a local body, so we had a chat. I told him who I was, and he asked me who I was and what I was doing, whatever. And then in the church, he of course called me out and made me stand up. Anyway, that was lovely and really, really heartwarming and welcoming, and I really appreciated that. But then after church, the woman who I was sitting just in line between me and Father Patrick, came up to me and asked to talk to me, and it turned out her people were from North Allihies. Donna. Hi, Donna. So we had a chat, and then she wanted to do some research. So she came into me in the Butte archives to do research about Allihies. That was kind of strange but lovely, and so we connected there, and that was great. And it's great to see you here as well this time. Also that first weekend, this is a funny story. I've repeated this a few times this weekend. So I got a phone call from people, I'll tell you who in a minute, to ask me would I like to go for a drink on Friday after work. And I said, oh yeah, great fun, that's brilliant. And I just said it, kind of, oh, I have a date at 5:30 or whatever it was. And somebody said, Jesus, that was quick. And I said, Mike and Helen, for God's sake. So it turned out it was Mike, Helen, Jim, and Kim. Yeah, we all went for a drink to Sláinte. So that was the first kind of social occasion, which was the first of many. So, but underneath all that, so like say for example, I would be working, you know, at the weekends of reading, and Lindsay brought me to Holy Cross and to St. Patrick's to find grace, my own family grace, but also grace for other people. And this is a very interesting experience. A book was published in Beara in 2019 by the grandnephew and grandniece of a man who had had a horrific accident on a farm just west of Beara in the 1880s, something like that, as a 9-year-old boy. The details of which you can read about, the book is in the archives. A horrific accident which meant he could neither sit, stand or walk. And his older brother felt very guilty about what had happened, and he emigrated to Butte. This man's name was Tommy Gill, and he never came home. And his family, when they heard I was going to Butte, the writer of the book and his sister asked me would I try and visit the grave. So Lindsay helped me in this, and I had the reference, and Lindsay, Coley and Rizzy and myself went to the grave that the reference we were given, and it was clearly not his grave, because it was a baby land grave, right? Do you remember that? And Coley, being Coley, was like her mother, was persistent. She said, we have to find it, darling. I said, well, this isn't it, and it started to pour rain. Anyway, very quickly, we went back home, and they went off about their business, and I contacted Find a Grave and said, this doesn't seem to be right. So very quickly I got a response saying, it is a mistake, it was one digit out, and she found the right reference, and then whoever the volunteer was, went out and marked the grave, because it was an unmarked grave. So she marked it with 2 different pink flags, and then the following weekend, Jim, Lindsay and the girls and myself went out and we placed some flowers on this grave. And that was a moment of just extraordinary emotion, because I kind of feel that nobody ever visited that man's grave. He was a single man who came and worked here and died with guilt on his conscience because he felt responsible for his brother's accident. So to be able to put flowers on his grave was amazing. And just as we were about to leave, this extraordinarily beautiful rainbow appeared over the skyline. So we took a picture of that and sent that and the flowers and the picture of the flowers to the family, who were eternally grateful. So those kind of emotional, like there's also facts that we can connect with over culture and all the rest of it, and history and so on and so forth. But it's the heart stuff that's what I meant with that card. Yeah. And we were walking up yesterday, and Jim said, are you glad to be back? And I started to cry. I said, yes. Stop
Okay, so, Claudia's first time is this time. We've only been here for a couple of days, but are you enjoying it?
I'm feeling very good. I'm really enjoying it. Those people are really amazing, and just yesterday we were walking in windy conditions just up to the hill, and just all those laughs and kindness and really just small talks with people I probably see the first time in my life. Surely I see them first time in my life. It's absolutely heartwarming and meltdown, like just really it's a beautiful feeling just to get to know all those people and hear this history and actually a lesson learned about just how to find my roots. And I think when I come back to Ireland, just on any occasion when I go back to Poland for a holiday, I'm gonna try to do my homework and find my past and my ancestors as well. I learned it's very important here, and you give that spirit, like a strong community spirit. It's in here, it's still alive, and it's such a beautiful thing. So again, it's really amazing. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Ty has touched on this, and Niall mentioned it at the beginning, but I'd kind of like to get into it deeper, as well as Aubrey has too, for that matter. But what relationships are there to ensure the ties between Butte and Beara continue, and how would you like to see these grow?
Well, yes, Lindsay, as I was saying yesterday, Claudia and myself met with JP, Gallagher and Aubrey, and we have sister city status and relationship for the past 3 years, but we want to move that on. We want to make a solid framework that we can put the flesh on the bones, as I said, and have a 3-year or a 5-year strategic plan whereby Niall's already doing the virtual connections with the education. That's a fantastic thing that he's doing and making it real. We want to take it beyond that to have actual students coming from Beara to Butte and vice versa. Maybe cultural groups travelling from Butte to Beara and to Allihies and vice versa. And have this down in a framework whereby we agreed some headings that we would work towards, but that we would have it a solid structure, not just an aspirational thing, that we would really make it real and make it in such a way that it can be developed for years to come. And of course, when you're doing these things, you always develop with the youth, with the schools, and when you start there, it grows and they start to appreciate, and that's all part of the whole sister city thing that we put in place and that we've been thinking about for many years, and it started to grow. We started the ball rolling in 22 before it actually, and the ball is rolling along, and we would just want to give it a bit more momentum, a bit more impetus, and we will do that over the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Ty mentioned the virtual education exchange. Some of you may have been up at the original yesterday, where myself and Brett Hewland from Butte spoke about that project. We played testimonials from children and from teachers, and I held back one testimonial which was from a mother and a child, her child. It's a 4-minute video clip, and it's a really gorgeous piece. And there's a few lines, quotes within it from mother, Michela, who is from Castleton. And one of them is that she was struck by the link and the power of the virtual program, the power the virtual program had on reigniting that link, and how curious the children were about it, and the curiosity that it brought up for the students. And I suppose, like, really it's to feed into that curiosity now and carry that forward, like Thaig has said there, just to get the ball rolling with a little bit more momentum, even though it's that ball is rolling steadily, really. But if you get a chance, we're going to try to publish that that clip from Magella and her daughter Phoebe, and I think you would really enjoy it. It kind of summarises what it's all about, really. Yeah, it hits the nail on the head. And to hear the children speaking about the programme yesterday on audio, and of course Brett's, one of Brett's students was on stage yesterday. She spoke really beautifully as well. It kind of just brings home how important it is to have the younger generation on board now and bring them forward with this beautiful connection that we have.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd just like to add something to that. Like as Ty mentioned earlier, this from our side, the whole Mine Museum project started 30. I think you're probably being a little bit conservative, like actually. Cautious, probably the word, maybe 30 plus years ago, where a group of like-minded people got together in Allihies. And you know, one of the differences, I hope I'm not jumping the gun with your questions, but one of the, it has occurred to me, and this occurred to me the last time I came, and even probably more so this time, hearing Mary this morning talk about her father and his fantastic, his memories, and how articulately and how lovely and how well he was able to describe them, that your connection with the mining is probably a generation more recent than ours. Because ours, you know, we're talking about people that obviously lived in the 1880s, 1890s, started in 1870s, 80s. So we were, I think, probably a generation removed. And with the result that 30 years ago, it's hard to believe now when we're sitting here talking to you and all these connections that we've talked about have been made and are still being made and are strengthening. But in Allihies 30 years ago, the mining story and the mining history was so close to being completely forgotten about. Now that's hard to imagine, you know, hearing how strong our connections are right now, but that is actually the truth. Because as I say, you know, we were talking about people that lived in the late 1800s, and we had, you know, we had the ruins of a Methodist church that were connected to the mining. We had an iconic engine house up on the mountain, which has been restored since. But the living history was actually nearly gone. Would I be right in saying that? I don't think that's true. And we were very acutely aware that if we didn't do something then, it was in danger of being lost completely, because you had people, you know, the stories were in danger of being forgotten about, and the people that had the last connections with the mines were getting scarcer and scarcer. So we grabbed that, you know, and thankfully we all were on the same wavelength, we all had the same interest in preserving our heritage, and it started from there. And it started, you know, the usual little meetings and dark, damp committee halls and the likes of it over long winter nights and so on. But it went from there to where we are today. And something just as well that I'd like to add, okay, so we built this mine museum. We were very intent on that, on preserving the history, as I said. But at the end of the day, a mine museum is a building of artifacts and non-living things. And it's only as valuable as the energy and the communication between our two places that's behind it. So actually, like, our dream that we started like 30 years ago, I'm so proud to be here today, as I was 2 years ago, because to me, it has come full circle. And you know, what started as a dream, and as I say, we had nothing, we had the ruin of a building. That's what we had, which is now an absolutely beautiful, vibrant mine museum, which many of you have seen. But beyond that, we have this whole living connection now. And what Niall mentioned about the schools project, and us coming here, and people from Butte coming back and forth, that's the real history we want to preserve. And it's so proud to say that this is where we're at today. It's wonderful.
just wanted to follow up on something that Alan was talking about, and Niall, obviously the schools connection. So when you guys were with us last year and we visited the schools, I was actually blown away by the appetite in the primary schools and the secondary school for the stories. I was really amazed.
Yeah.
There is in there a real appetite to hear the stories, and that's wonderful. Sure.
So we were able to go to, I believe it was 8 schools, from primary kids to high school students, schools that were fairly large to a school that is basically multiple grades in one room. It was really incredible. But what's a really fun story we forgot to share and kind of ties back to everything is when we went to Allihies, Jim and I went to Allihies and went to the grade school, and the teacher there was incredibly passionate about it, or the school principal was, headmaster, was really passionate about it, but there was one little boy there, and he goes to Jim, "I'm your cousin." His name, I think, was Ty. Is that incorrect?
He's O'Shea. His name's O'Shea.
Ty O'Shea?
Is he?
He's Jones, son of say.
Joel and Martha.
Oh yeah, so either Krita or Ty. Yeah, Ty.
Okay. But it was incredible, and just that, this little boy that was maybe 9 or so, just going, "I'm your cousin, Jim." That was really cool. Yeah, it was pretty incredible going to all these schools and seeing those connections and hearing their stories of connecting to our youth here as well.
I'm being aware of our time here, and I'm going to wrap it up, but first I'd like to ask, I can see somebody already has their hand up, if somebody would like to ask the panel a question.
I'd like to see a raise of hands on all those that have relatives in the Beara Peninsula.
I'm going to say majority, if not at least half.
Might be easier to say who hasn't.
Yeah. How many of you have been to Beara? That's awesome. That's great.
That's pretty good.
Keeping that connection alive once again.
That's good.
Once again.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, Niall has a question.
Really nice exercise, Mike, that to raising your hand to who has connections. We did the exact same activity on one of our, or we do, on the virtual exchange which we do between the schools in Beara and Butte. So it's using the Zoom platform, and a question we ask at the start of the series of Zooms is, put up your hand if you have a connection with Butte, put up your hand if you have a connection with Beara. And in one particular class, on the first day, on the first Zoom, one person out of the 22 pupils put up their hand saying they had a connection. That was in the school in Castletownbere. And none of the children in Butte put up their hands saying they had a connection. And by the time we finished the series of Zooms, say 6 weeks later, 13 children had put up their hands in both classes. So in Butte and in Beara, it happens to be the same number, but like that's a result and that's a result of conversation. Yeah. So that's just what Mike asked there, reminded me of that, and I think it's a nice thing to share.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Does anyone else have anything? No? Okay. I am remembering something that Anna and I talked about yesterday, and I'd like to touch on that. That you have a lot of programming at the Allihies Copper Mine Museum, something in particular I may not be wanting to mention.
Well, I'll start actually by saying just another observation of mine. I've been in Butte twice now. It's my second trip to Butte, and it's my fourth trip to the USA. And on my first trip to the US, which wasn't in Butte, it was started in New York and wandered our way west, kind of Indiana, Chicago trip. And there was something I couldn't, something that was kind of eating me about the landscape, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And after maybe a week, it occurred to me that everything seemed so new, relatively new. As in, I suppose there are defining moments in the evolution of every society, but in Irish society, one of the great defining moments, times, was the coming of Christianity. Now, I won't go into this, don't worry, but this is not going to get too deep. But just suffice it to say that pre-Christian Ireland, there was an incredibly rich culture, which you're probably aware of. I saw a lovely stand-up in the Raw yesterday of all the Celtic. And from a very, very young age in Ireland, we are totally aware of our ancient history, because we're surrounded by it in the landscape by way of name places. And we're surrounded by, megalithic tombs. You probably have heard of the Neolithic tombs that go back thousands of years. So we are steeped in this ancient history, which the Department of Education thankfully really invests in. So from your teeny top, from the time you go to school, you learn of that history, of your ancient history. And where I'm going with this is, growing up and the story of Butte and Allihies, we knew more about our ancient history than we did about the history of our own little place in the 1800s. Now, as we said, we've done a lot about that, and we're after rejuvenating that. But in Butte and in America, it's almost like it's the opposite. This is my own observation. Like, you have your streetscapes, and are so connected with the mining. Your buildings are connected right back to the 1800s, and all those old signs that you're so connected to your mining days still in your landscape and so on. So I think, whereas we didn't have that really, so I think we had to dig very deep to kind of to resurrect that. Our history with the mining, but we did, and we obviously did it very successfully. But part of the Mine Museum, we have an education hub, and we don't limit it just to mining, we branch out into other things. And again, we like to give it history-based. And we have a very exciting project coming up in October, which is celebrating one of our ancient goddesses, going back to that pre-Christian time I talked about, the Beara, which is the Gaelic term. It's loosely translated as the Beara, which we don't particularly like, the wise woman Beara. But she was an ancient Irish goddess. She was the creator of all our landscapes in Beara. She lived through 9 generations. Her stories are legendary. I won't keep you. But suffice it to say that in October, as I say, we are celebrating that part of our history, which is so ancient, but is hugely important. So it's lovely to think that, as I say, what our mine museum and what we've created there is we're able to branch out now. We've kind of done, we're worked on the Butte, and we're still working on it. It's an evolving project, but we're at the stage now where we can actually branch out into other things. So we're celebrating, as I say, our more ancient past, and we're very excited about that. The Beara, if you wanted to check her out, she was a great lady, forced to be reckoned with. But anyway.
Thank you for sharing that. Learning about Ireland's ancient history was one of my favorite things, actually, when we were there last year, visiting the Beara and the Children of Lear. Yeah, it was fascinating. Anyway, this will conclude it for now. If you see these guys out and about, we'll be at the festival. Feel free to come up to them, talk to them, or any of us for that matter. We talk to the Butte people too. We're not as exciting, obviously. But otherwise, I'd like to thank Butte Brewing for hosting us, Colleen O'Boyle for providing some tasty Blarney stones for our guests. And if you feel so generous, we always appreciate a drop in the bucket to continue to keep on going in Butte. All right, thank you.